Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Wisteria here. This tale, or folk tale I should say, really, that's what they are, from Shropshire, is called Wild Will of Wenlock. There was once a new prior at Wenlock Priory, John the Tickford, and everyone seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Johnny Tickford was a breath of fresh air. After years of raising taxes to pay for endless building work under Prior Humbert, the priory was ready for a change. John de Tickford was young, quite young for a prior anyway, but charming. He seemed determined to work for the good of the priory and put right all the wrongs. Shortly after he arrived, a visitation of priors came to inspect his progress. Although they found the priory was deeply in debt, they left well pleased by the idealistic young prior. They were convinced that John was dedicated to the well-being of the priory and putting the finances back in order. John de Tickford was equally well pleased with the visitation, but Tickford was not what he seemed. He was ambitious, manipulative, and hungry for power. His eye was actually on Bishopric of Rochester. Now the building work had finished. Wenlock was one of the richest priories in the country. The heavy debts were fabricated purely to line John de Tickford's pockets. Tickford was lavish in his granting of rights of St. Milburger's land and assets, securing friends and favours in high places, paving his way for promotion. For a long time, his charming smile and sincere manner fooled everyone. Though on the surface all seemed well, cracks slowly began to appear in John de Tickford's veneer. Most people found them easy to ignore. It was easy to accept the prior's reassurances. But one monk, William of Broseley, began to feel uncomfortable. William was not an ambitious man. He had no desire for leadership nor power. He simply wanted to spend his days in quiet and honest prayer work. But it seemed the Lord had another destiny in mind for William. At first it was nothing he could put his finger on, just a growing unease in the pit of his stomach. But things didn't add up, literally. Some of the transactions agreed by the prior were unfathomable, and William felt compelled to look through the prior's dealings and the prior's accounts. At last, he confronted the prior, John de Tickford, and he listened to all that William had to say. He smiled at him and talked about the responsibilities and intricacies of leadership, how he appreciated William's concern, and how the church needed honest, conscious souls like William. He told William there was no need to worry, put his arm around Will's shoulder, and escorted him from his chambers. A few days later, William discovered he was transferred to Northampton. William sat on Wenlock Edge, wrestling with his conscience. He looked out across Shropshire and contemplated what he could do and what of his future. Now he knew for sure that John de Tickford was up to no good. William could not ignore the truth of it. It seemed God had chosen him as an instrument to combat the prior of Wenlock. William was not sure he wanted to be so favoured by the Lord. He never went to Northampton, but hid on Wenlock Edge, as a renegade, waiting for his opportunity. William had never dreamed he would end up as a criminal. His intention was to expose the prior and his wrongs, then return to a peaceful life. When he realised that Robert D. Trillick, the sheriff of Salop, was hunting him, he thought his opportunity had come. Here was his chance to reveal the sheriff the corruption within the priory. Robert could prove that the prior was a crook, and a far greater scale than William could ever be. And so William gave himself up at Wenlock. The sheriff was unsurprised by Will's accusations. With dawning comprehension, Will realised that the sheriff already knew about the prior and didn't care. The sheriff laughed when he saw Will's sudden understanding and frustration, and then locked him in a prison cell in Bridgnorth. No one was more surprised than Will when the door opened. There stood the sheriff and a monk from the priory. The sheriff's lips curled back in a thin smile. "Nice to meet you, Will. You know where we are. Any time you want to come and stay again," he said, as the monk took Will's arm and guided him out. "How did you get me out?" asked Will. "More importantly, why did you get me out? I'm not going to Northampton." Will tried to pull his arm free from the monk's grip. "Don't worry, Will. I want to join you. I know why you left. I know about the prior, and the sheriff is as bad as or worse, I think. He was happy enough to set you free, once I made it worth his while." "You bribed the sheriff?" "Easily something must be done, Will. And I think God has chosen you." The monk held out his hand. Will hesitated for a moment, then clasped it with a grin. That was how it started. William began a campaign to reclaim the money the prior used for bribes and favours and give it back to the people worse off, and the suffering, the ones that suffered most under prior's taxes and the sheriff's greed. At first, it was just a few monks from the priory that stood up to John de Tickford, but soon local men joined them, bringing a stream of accusations against the sheriff, his bailiffs, and the so-called keepers of peace. It was wildly, and wildly so, acknowledged that Robert de Trillock treated the laws of the king with contempt, unless he could use them to his financial advantage. Secluded in the priory, William had not realised how hard life was for the common workers. Time and again they heard tales of the sheriff and his underlings taking bribes to remove names from court summons, taking monies due to the king and pocketing them, and of innocent families thrown into prison while their homes were plundered and pillaged. Over and over they heard cases such as Lovkins, a fisherman of Coldbrook. A couple of keepers of the peace arrested him for no reason and, without a warrant, seized a crate of fish and 2 silver shillings before taking him to prison, where the sheriff held him until Lovkin paid 2 marks for his freedom. William and his band took up arms. No longer was William of Brosby the monk. Instead, he was Wild Will of Wenlock. He and his band became highwaymen along Wenlock Edge. They let normal drovers, pilgrims, and merchants pass freely, but travellers on priory business were stopped, and money from or for the prior's coffers were confiscated and redistributed to local people. When any of Robert de Trillock's underlings were caught passing that way, they were dressed to show their crimes and tied to a tree. A message was then sent to Trillock. One man's plunder had included linens, cloaks, and chemises. He was left in nothing but a chemise. When one of Lovkin's intimidators was caught, he was left standing in a crate of rotten fish. On one occasion, the sheriff came to release one of his men, to find that he had been smeared with bacon fat and strips of bacon left between his back and the tree. The man was wriggling and writhing, unable to escape or brush away the ants that covered his body. Outside of Shropshire, John de Tickford and Robert de Trillock were well respected. Of course, the news came that one of Shropshire's was mainly filtered through their minions. While Wild Will tried to expose the sheriff and prior for the crooks they were, rumours spread around England of a fierce band of armed monks seeking to ambush and kill the holy prior of Wenlock. The king issued a government order to all sheriffs and bailiffs to arrest the vagabond monks. Trillock had cause to regret releasing Will. He regularly organised sweeps through the forest to try and flush out the band, but as soon as the sheriff's men appeared, Will and his followers seemed to vanish like the mist. For 10 years, Wild Will and his band lived in the woods on Wenlock Edge, harrying the prior and sheriff, giving hope to the common people. But eventually, Will's luck had run out. The sheriff finally captured Will, and this time would not accept payment for his release. Guarded by an armed escort to prevent his rescue, he was taken to Oswald's and executed apparently on the 2nd of August 1283. But Will had set wheels in motion. Justice was served, and eventually John de Tickford and Robert de Trillock were thwarted. The sheriff's fatal mistake was taking money due to the king. The king ordered an inquiry, which uncovered Robert de Trillock's widespread corruption, and he was punished accordingly. John de Tickford received another visitation from the Cluniac order. This time they discovered his deception and misuse of funds. He was removed from office at Wenlock in 1284 and never did receive a bishopric, though his last act as prior was to sell in advance the wool crops for the next 7 years and take the money with him. The end. Why does that sound a lot like Robin Hood? Do you not think? I think so, guys. I think that sounds a lot like Robin Hood. But it's a monk who turned a highwayman. Interesting. But yeah, sad. Executed on the 2nd of August 1283. And they did not find out that John de Tickford was bad until 1284. And he still took off, and he still took loads of money with him, so I suppose, yeah, he did get away with it, didn't he, really? Because he took off. But that's a really interesting story because it reminds me of Robin Hood. Thank you for listening. Please hit that like, share, and if you have not subscribed, please do so. And many blessings.